I signed the divorce, but silence kept her alive. One careless night, rain-soaked memories touched skin again. Her call pregnant shattered fear awake. Love rose from ruins, demanding choice, repeat the past, or fight us. If you like this story, then press like button and tell in comments where from you watching. For more emotional and romantic stories, press subscribe button, watch till end, thanks. Our divorce wasn't loud. No doors slammed. No voices broke. No neighbors leaned in to listen. And somehow, that silence hurt more than screaming ever could. We sat across from each other in an office that smelled like stale paper and cheap coffee, nodding as if we were agreeing to something ordinary, like canceling a subscription instead of ending a life we once swore to protect. The pen felt heavier than it should have. When I signed my name, my hand didn't shake. That scared me. When she signed hers, her lips pressed together, tight, as if holding back words that had already learned how to suffocate. That was it. Years reduced to ink. We didn't fall apart in one moment. We unraveled slowly, quietly, like a thread pulled too gently for anyone to notice until the fabric finally gave way. We were still standing on the same road, but somewhere along the way, our steps stopped matching. I walked faster. She slowed down. Or maybe she kept pace, and I was the one who drifted ahead without looking back. By the time we realized the distance, it wasn't a gap anymore. It was a canyon. We blamed the usual things. Work that followed us home. Stress that slept between us. Timing that never felt right. We used those words like shields, because the truth was sharper. Because admitting that we had failed each other felt worse than blaming the world. On her last night in the house, she packed quietly. No dramatic pauses. No final arguments. Just the sound of drawers opening and closing, zippers pulling tight, footsteps moving back and forth like a ghost rehearsing how to leave. I stayed in the living room, pretending the television mattered more than the way my chest felt hollow. I told myself that giving her space was respectful. Now I wonder if it was just cowardice. When the door closed behind her, the house didn't feel empty right away. It took time, like grief always does. At first, it felt peaceful, too peaceful. I walked through the rooms telling myself this was freedom. That silence meant relief. Then morning came. Her mug was still in the cabinet, the chipped white one with a faint crack near the handle. I reached for it without thinking, then froze. I didn't put it back. I left it on the counter, as if she might come in and finish the coffee later. She didn't. Her shampoo stayed in the bathroom, the scent clinging stubbornly to the air. I told myself I'd throw it out. I never did. Some nights, I stood under the shower letting the water run too long, breathing in a memory I wasn't ready to bury. The bed was the worst. Her side stayed untouched, cold, the sheet smooth in a way that felt wrong. I slept on the edge without meaning to, my body still remembering how much space she used to take. My hand reached out in the dark more than once, only to close around nothing. That was when the question started. How does love disappear without a clear ending? How do two people who once knew each other's breathing patterns become strangers again? I told myself I was okay. I told everyone else the same. I went to work. I answered messages. I learned how to cook for one. I smiled in public. I practiced being fine until the act almost convinced me. Almost. We stayed civil. That word became our truce. Birthday texts that arrived exactly at midnight, polite and brief. Necessary calls about paperwork and loose ends. Messages stripped of emotion, like carefully edited sentences where every feeling had been deleted before sending. We spoke the way people do when they're afraid one wrong word might reopen something they don't know how to close again. I convinced myself that detachment meant healing. That distance was proof of progress. But healing doesn't ache like that. Healing doesn't make your chest tighten when a familiar name lights up your phone. Healing doesn't steal your breath before you even read the message. Healing doesn't make you stare at a screen, heart racing, wondering whether to respond immediately or wait long enough to seem unaffected. Every time I saw her name, something in me broke open again. Sometimes it was nothing important, logistics, forgotten items, signatures. Sometimes it was a simple hope you're doing well. Those were the worst. Because they sounded kind. Because they reminded me of the woman who once knew exactly how to calm me with just her voice. I replayed our past in fragments. Not the fights. Not the long silences at the end. I remembered the early mornings when she'd steal my shirt and make coffee barefoot in the kitchen. The way she laughed when I pretended not to care. The way she used to trace invisible patterns on my arm when she thought I was asleep. Those memories felt like photographs left out in the rain, blurred, damaged, but impossible to throw away. One afternoon, while cleaning out a drawer, I found a letter she had written years ago. I didn't remember receiving it. Maybe I never really read it when it mattered. The paper had yellowed slightly, the ink faded but steady. "I'm scared of losing us," it said. "Not because I don't love you, but because I don't know how to reach you anymore." My hand shook as I folded it back up. I wondered how many warnings I'd mistaken for noise. How many chances I'd ignored because I thought love was something that survived on its own. Outside, rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier, tapping against the windows like fingers asking to be let in. I stood there listening, realizing how often weather had accompanied our most important moments. Rain during our first argument. Sunlight flooding the room the morning after our wedding. Storms we'd watched together, pressed close on the couch, believing we were unbreakable. Now the rain fell without her. Weeks turned into months. Time moved forward, even when I felt stuck. Friends asked if I was dating again. I laughed it off. I told them I wasn't ready. The truth was simpler and harder, I wasn't interested. Every face blurred into comparison. Every conversation felt incomplete. Distance didn't heal me. It only taught me how deep the wound really was. The last message she sent before everything changed was short. "Can we talk sometime?" No emojis. No softness. Just 4 words that sat on my screen like a held breath. I stared at it longer than I should have. Outside, the sky was clear, bright in a way that felt almost cruel. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. In the end, I wrote, "Yes." I didn't know then that this quiet chapter, the silence, the restraint, the pretending, was only the calm before something far more complicated. That love doesn't always leave when you ask it to. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it watches. Sometimes it comes back wearing consequences you never planned for. As I put the phone down, my chest tightened with a feeling I couldn't name yet. Not hope. Not fear. Something in between. Something unfinished. The house was still quiet. But for the first time since she left, the silence felt like it was listening back. We met by accident. At least, that's what I tell myself when I try to sleep at night. It was a small gathering, nothing dramatic. A mutual friend's place. Soft music humming in the background. Laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes of the people making it. I almost didn't go. I stood in front of the mirror longer than necessary, adjusting a shirt no one cared about, telling myself it was just another night meant to pass quietly. Then I walked in and saw her. She stood near the window, light spilling over her shoulders, her reflection faint against the glass. For a moment, the room tilted. She looked familiar in the most dangerous way. Not the woman I divorced, but the woman I first fell in love with. Stronger now. Quieter. Like someone who had survived something and learned how to carry it without asking for help. Our eyes met. Neither of us smiled. That distance we had learned so well stretched between us again, invisible but heavy. We nodded politely, like strangers who shared a secret neither dared to name. I told myself not to stare. I failed almost immediately. She wore a dress that wasn't meant for me to notice. Simple. Elegant. But it fit her the way memory fits pain, too perfectly. I wondered, briefly and stupidly, if she had dressed that way for herself or for a life that no longer included me. We didn't talk at first. We orbited the room, collecting small conversations, pretending the other didn't pull at us like gravity. Every laugh she gave someone else landed too close to my chest. Every time I spoke, I was aware of her listening, even when she pretended not to. Eventually, the universe, or maybe our shared history, got tired of the act. We ended up standing near the same table, reaching for the same glass at the same time. Our fingers brushed. It was barely anything. Skin against skin for less than a second. It felt like everything. "Sorry," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "Me too," I replied, though I wasn't sure for what. We stood there, awkward and unfinished, until she broke the silence. "How have you been?" It was the safest question. And the most dangerous. "Okay," I said. A lie that passed easily through my lips. She nodded, as if she understood the language of half-truths better than anyone. "That's good." We talked about small things. Work. Mutual friends. Neutral territory. Our words tiptoed around the past like it was a sleeping animal that might wake and bite if we weren't careful. But beneath every sentence was tension, pulling tight with each breath. Someone handed us drinks. I didn't remember asking for one. She didn't refuse hers. The music grew louder. The room warmer. Time softer around the edges. One drink turned into another. Another turned into honesty. Not the kind that explodes, but the kind that leaks out slowly when defenses get tired. "I hate the quiet," she admitted at one point, staring into her glass. "After divorce. It's louder than I expected." My chest tightened. "Yeah. It is." She laughed softly, without humor. Funny how silence can feel like punishment. That sentence landed somewhere deep. I looked at her then, really looked. The way her shoulders tensed when she spoke about loneliness. The way her fingers traced circles on the glass, like she was grounding herself. "I thought I'd feel free," I said before I could stop myself. "But some nights, it just feels empty." She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was quiet. I thought I was the only one who felt that. The distance between us shrank, not physically, but emotionally. The room around us blurred. It felt like standing in the middle of a memory that hadn't decided whether it belonged to the past or the present. We moved to the balcony for air. The night was warm. City lights stretched out below us like a living thing, breathing. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just stood there, side by side, staring out at something neither of us could name. "I miss us," she said suddenly. The words hit harder than any accusation ever could. "I know we're not supposed to say that," she added quickly, as if afraid she'd broken a rule. Sometimes I wonder if we gave up too quietly." I swallowed. The truth pressed against my ribs, sharp and insistent. "I wonder that too." That was the moment. The one we would later try to dissect. The one we would label a mistake. But standing there, under open sky, it didn't feel wrong. It felt honest. Like two people finally admitting they were still bleeding from the same wound. We didn't plan what happened next. There was no dramatic decision. No clear line crossed with intention. Just a series of small steps, closer, closer, until the past caught up with us. Her apartment wasn't far. The walk there was quiet, charged. Our arms brushed occasionally. Each time, neither of us pulled away. The city hummed around us, unaware it was witnessing something fragile being rebuilt on borrowed time. Inside, the lights were low. Clean. Unfamiliar. I noticed the absence of me everywhere. New paintings on the wall. Furniture arranged without my habits in mind. It made something twist in my chest. She hesitated near the door, fingers hovering over the switch. "We don't have to." "I know," I said. That was all it took. The kiss wasn't desperate. It was careful. Like touching something that might shatter if held too tightly. Her lips trembled. Mine followed. Years collapsed in 2 seconds. Regret and longing tangled until I couldn't tell them apart. Clothes became details. Time lost its shape. For a brief, dangerous moment, it felt like coming home. After, we lay there in the quiet, the weight of reality slowly returning. Her breathing evened out. I stared at the ceiling, already feeling the familiar ache of consequence settling in. Morning came too quickly. Sunlight spilled across the room, exposing everything we'd tried not to think about. I dressed quietly. She watched me from the bed, her expression unreadable. "This doesn't change anything," I said. I don't know who I was trying to convince. She nodded. "I know." We hugged, briefly, carefully, like people afraid of breaking something already cracked. I left with the echo of her presence clinging to me. On the walk home, the city looked the same. But I didn't. I told myself it was a moment of weakness. A goodbye disguised as intimacy. Something that would fade once enough time passed. I was wrong. Because some nights don't end when you walk away. Some nights wait. And weeks later, when my phone rang and her name lit up the screen again, I would understand that this night hadn't been a mistake at all. It had been the beginning of a consequence neither of us was ready to face. The morning her name lit up my phone, the world didn't pause, but I did. I was standing in my kitchen, coffee growing cold in my hand, sunlight spilling across the counter like nothing had changed. That felt cruel. The quiet after that night had stretched on long enough for me to convince myself I'd imagined its importance. Long enough to believe it would stay buried where I left it. Her name proved otherwise. I didn't answer right away. I watched the screen vibrate, my heartbeat sinking with it, each pulse louder than the last. Somewhere in my chest, instinct warned me that once I picked up, there would be no returning to who I was a second before. "Hello?" My voice didn't sound like mine. She didn't greet me. Didn't ask how I was. Her breath came uneven through the line, fragile and sharp all at once. "I didn't know who else to call," she said. The room tilted. I sat down without realizing it, the chair scraping softly against the floor. "What's wrong?" Silence stretched between us, thin, trembling. Then she spoke the word that rewrote everything. "I'm pregnant." The sentence landed without drama. No build-up. No softness. Just truth. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. That my mind had filled in something impossible because it was already afraid. "What?" I whispered. "With your child," she added, quieter now. My fingers went numb. The phone felt heavier than it should have, like it carried weight beyond plastic and glass. Fear rushed in first, hot, disorienting. Fear of responsibility. Fear of repeating everything we broke the first time. Fear that I would hurt her again without meaning to. I asked questions that barely mattered. Dates. Doctors. Certainty. She answered patiently, like she'd already had this conversation a dozen times alone. Yes, she was sure. Yes, she'd thought about every possibility. Yes, it was mine. She wasn't crying. That unsettled me more than tears would have. Her strength sounded practiced, like armor worn too often. "I'm not calling to trap you," she said quickly, as if she could hear the panic I was trying to hide. "I just needed you to know. This is your child too." The word child echoed through me, colliding with memories I hadn't allowed myself to revisit. A future we once talked about. Names we never chose. A life we postponed because we thought there would always be time. "When did you find out?" I asked. "Last week." And suddenly I understood the quiet in her voice. The weight she'd been carrying alone. The night she must have stared at the ceiling the way I once did, wondering how everything had shifted without asking permission. "I didn't want to tell you over the phone," she said. But I didn't know how else to start. I pressed my free hand against my chest, as if that could steady the chaos inside. Images flashed, her hand resting protectively over her stomach, a space inside her holding something fragile and real. Something ours. I don't know what to say, I admitted. That's okay, she replied. I just needed honesty. Not promises. Not decisions. Just acknowledgement. That was the moment something dangerous stirred beneath the fear. Love. Not the reckless kind. Not the version we burned through before. This one was quieter, heavier, edged with responsibility and regret. The kind that doesn't ask whether you're ready. I want to see you, I said before I could think better of it. She exhaled, a sound that felt like relief breaking through restraint. Okay. After the call ended, the house felt different. Smaller. Charged. I noticed things I hadn't before, the picture frame still turned face down on the shelf, the letter I'd folded and unfolded too many times. Outside, clouds gathered, slow and deliberate, dimming the bright morning. I stood by the window, watching the sky change, understanding for the first time that some consequences don't arrive to punish you. They arrive to ask who you're willing to become. And as thunder rolled softly in the distance, I realized the past wasn't done with us yet. It was asking for a future. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun uselessly, counting rotations like they might organize my thoughts. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, a car passing outside, my own breathing. My mind kept returning to a single image I couldn't shake, her alone, sitting somewhere in the quiet, one hand resting unconsciously on her stomach. I wondered if she had smiled when she first found out. Or if fear had arrived first, the way it always does when life changes without permission. I thought about the version of me she was trusting with this truth. The man who walked away that morning. The man who told himself it meant nothing. Shame settled in slowly, heavy and deserved. At dawn, I found myself standing in the hallway, staring at the old painting we never took down. A half-finished landscape she once worked on, soft hills fading into light. She'd said she liked unfinished things. Said they felt honest. I finally understood what she meant. By mid-morning, I was driving without music, knuckles tight on the wheel, every mile pulling me closer to a conversation that would change everything again. I rehearsed words I didn't trust. Apologies that felt too small. Promises I wasn't sure I deserved to make. When I reached her street, I parked a block away. Fear stopped me before I reached the door. Fear of seeing her differently. Fear of realizing how much I'd already lost. But when she opened the door, all of it collapsed. She looked tired. Not broken, just quietly exhausted, like someone who had been holding herself together for too long. The space between us filled instantly with things unsaid. "Come in," she said. And as I stepped inside, I knew Chapter 3 wasn't ending with the call. It was ending with the moment I finally chose to stay. Her apartment smelled like citrus cleaner and something softer beneath it, familiar in a way that unsettled me. Morning light pooled on the floor, tracing clean lines across furniture I didn't recognize. Evidence of a life rearranged without me. She closed the door gently behind us. The click sounded final, like a punctuation mark we couldn't ignore. We stood there, a careful distance apart. Intimacy hovered, fragile and restrained. I wanted to reach for her. I didn't. She noticed. The smallest nod passed between us, acknowledgement without permission. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure I deserved to," I replied. She gestured toward the kitchen. We sat across from each other at a small table, sunlight warming the wood between us. A folded envelope lay near her elbow. My name was written on it in handwriting I could still recognize blind. "I wrote this before I called," she said. "I didn't know if I'd ever give it to you. I didn't touch it yet. Some truths need air before hands." We talked, not around the past, but through it. About the nights we stopped asking questions. About how pride made us efficient at surviving and terrible at listening. About the arguments that ended too quickly because neither of us wanted to lose. I needed you to fight for us, she said, steady but raw. Not loudly. Just consistently. I swallowed. I thought giving space was love. It felt like abandonment, she answered, not cruel, honest. The word stayed with me. She stood and crossed the room, returning with a small ultrasound photo. She didn't hand it to me right away. She placed it on the table, between us, like a bridge made of paper. I don't want promises, she said. I want presence. I picked up the photo. Black and white. Grainy. Undeniable. A future already moving. I can do presence, I said quietly. I'm learning how. Her shoulders softened. Not surrender, consideration. We walked later, outside, the city bright and forgiving. She spoke about appointments. I listened. Really listened. The past walked beside us, but it didn't lead. When we stopped at the corner, she didn't step away. Neither did I. The light changed. So did something between us. Love didn't come back the way it left. It didn't arrive with fireworks or apologies dressed as miracles. It returned slowly, carefully, like something afraid of being rejected again. I noticed it in the smallest moments first, the way she waited for me before crossing the street, the way I learned to pause instead of filling silence with excuses. We started with routines. Doctor appointments penciled into my calendar in ink, not reminders I could swipe away. Coffee in the mornings before work, sitting side by side instead of across from each other. I learned the shape of her new life the way you learn a language, listening more than speaking. At the clinic, the walls were white and forgiving. She squeezed my hand during the wait, not looking at me, as if afraid the gesture might ask for too much. I squeezed back anyway. Presence, not promises. When the heartbeat filled the room, something inside me cracked open. Not fear, recognition. A rhythm that didn't belong to regret or nostalgia, but to something moving forward without permission. She cried quietly. I didn't wipe the tears away. I stayed. That felt more important. Outside, the day was bright, unapologetic. We walked without urgency, sharing observations instead of conclusions. She told me about the book she was reading, the painting she'd started again, another unfinished landscape, this one brighter than the last. I stopped trying to finish things, she said. I let them become. I understood that lesson too late the first time. We laughed more after that. Not because everything was fixed, but because laughter felt allowed again. I cooked dinner at her place and burned the rice. She teased me gently. I didn't retreat. When she corrected me, I listened. When I was tired, I said so. At night, I went home. That boundary mattered. Desire pressed at the edges, familiar and tempting, but we didn't rush. We let distance teach us restraint, and restraint made every touch mean something. One evening, rain surprised us. We stood under the awning of a closed bookstore, water drumming around us. She leaned into my shoulder without asking. I didn't flinch. This feels dangerous, she said softly. Only if we pretend it isn't, I answered. She looked up at me then, searching, not for reassurance, but for consistency. I held her gaze. I didn't overpromise. I didn't look away. Later, she handed me the letter she'd written. The one from the kitchen table. I read it slowly, standing in her living room while she watched from the doorway. I don't need to be chosen loudly, it said. I need to be chosen again tomorrow. I folded it carefully and placed it in my wallet. Weeks passed. Love didn't feel like rescue. It felt like work done willingly. Like learning where to place your feet so you don't step on old fractures. We disagreed sometimes. We didn't disappear. One night, she reached for my hand as we watched the city lights blink on. Stay, she said. I did. And in that staying, I realized I wasn't falling in love with who she used to be. I was choosing who we were becoming. The question didn't come with a ring. It came with consistency. I learned that love, the kind that survives wreckage, doesn't ask for grand gestures. It asks for mornings. For showing up when nothing is cinematic. For staying when fear whispers that leaving would be easier. We built those mornings slowly. Grocery lists on the fridge. Shoes by the door that weren't mine, but might be. Her laughter filling the kitchen again, tentative at first, then steady. I stopped treating happiness like a fragile thing that might shatter if I touched it. One evening, she invited me to her parents' house. The invitation felt heavier than it sounded. History lived there. Expectations. The version of me they once trusted. At dinner, her mother watched us carefully, noticing what we didn't say as much as what we did. When I refilled her glass without being asked, when I listened instead of interrupting, something softened across the table. Later, outside under a sky bruised with sunset, her father handed me a folded jacket and said, "Be patient. She carries storms quietly." I nodded. I already knew. Weeks turned into months. Her belly grew rounder, undeniable. I learned the language of kicks and cravings, of late-night worries that arrived without warning. I learned how to hold space without trying to fix it. How to sit beside her when fear came and not demand it leave. One night, during a storm, the power went out. We lit candles and sat on the floor, backs against the couch. Rain hammered the windows like a memory trying to get in. "Do you ever worry we're pretending?" she asked. I took a breath. "I worry we won't keep choosing each other when it gets ordinary." She smiled, sad, relieved. "Then promise me the ordinary." I didn't kneel. I didn't rehearse. I reached for her hands, warm and familiar. "I promise mornings," I said. Appointments. Arguments we finish. Apologies I don't delay. I promise I won't disappear when it's hard. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, there were tears, but no doubt. "Yes," she said. The word settled into the room like peace. We didn't erase the past. We framed it. Let it hang where we could see it without letting it lead. The old letter stayed in my wallet. The ultrasound photo moved to the fridge, held by a magnet shaped like a sun. On the day our child arrived, the hospital smelled like antiseptic and hope. Her grip crushed my fingers. I stayed. When the cry filled the room, sharp and alive, something final fell away. I understood then, love hadn't returned to save us. We had returned to love. Later, as dusk softened the windows, she rested with our child on her chest. She looked at me the way she once did, only steadier. "We did this," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "And tomorrow?" She smiled. "Tomorrow too."